Hello and welcome back to Reality Check. Now, I'm very excited about our guest today. When I was a young child in the 1970s, which is far too long ago for what I care to imagine, one of the most enthralling acts on TV and on the stage wasn't a musician, it wasn't an artist. It was an Israeli-British man called Uri Geller, who claimed to have psychic abilities. And he enthralled audiences around the world with his seeming ability to apparently bend spoons and stop clocks with his mind. He demonstrated what were apparently astonishing feats of telepathy, finding hidden objects, remote viewing images, skills of dowsing and telepathy. But Uri has also long been attacked by debunkers and skeptics as a charlatan and a fraud because he claims these psychic powers. And much of the official mainstream media coverage of his career pejoratively dismisses him as an illusionist, a magician, an entertainer who supposedly uses trickery to deceive his audience into believing what he's doing is real. Uri, though, has suggested that the paranormal skills he claims to have may indeed have been bestowed on him, perhaps even by an extraterrestrial intelligence. And that's something we'll ask him about today. And of course, such claims just infuriate the splenetic blood debunkers. There's a skeptic called James Randi who became the eminence grise of Uri. He went to great efforts to try to prove that Uri's alleged tricks could be replicated with stage magic, simple sleight of hand. Now, I would say it's still very much an open question whether and how Uri Geller is psychic, how he does what he does. And that's because 7 years ago, in 2017, declassified documents from the CIA showed that Uri Geller did convince America's top intelligence agency in scientific testing that he really did have psychic abilities. This secret project, codenamed the Stargate Project, made the official finding, quote, "As a result of Geller's success in this experimental period, we consider that he has demonstrated his paranormal perceptual ability in a convincing and unambiguous manner." The CIA's documents also show that Uri went on to work with the agency, helping it study his purported psychic powers, and in fact, he was deployed on operations. They took him very, very seriously indeed, despite what the skeptics say. Uri will turn 78 in December, but he has very graciously and kindly agreed to speak to us today from his home in Israel. But first, a wee plug for one of our sponsors. So we're talking again this week through our sponsor about the horrors of what happens to your body when you eat the ultra-processed food that passes for grub in America. And it turns out the key to losing weight and keeping it off is not in carbs or fat or even in probiotic-rich foods. No, the end game of having a healthy weight as well as more energy and a long, healthy life comes down to a specific switch you can flip in your body to flush out unnecessary calories. Dr. Stephen Gundry is calling this caloric bypass. And by activating this specific process in your body, he has seen thousands, yes, thousands of people dramatically improve their health, even at age 50 and beyond. This includes losing weight, getting tons more energy, and returning to the good health they had in their youth once they simply addressed this one key to better health. And not only is this associated with improved digestion, strong feeling joints and muscles, smoother skin and healthier lives, it could also be the key to a healthier life. Dr. Stephen Gundry's lost 70 pounds himself using his research and has kept the weight off for over 20 years and counting. His digestive issues are gone, his health is fantastic, and he feels younger and healthier today than he did in his 40s. His video has been watched by over 20 million people to date, and you can watch and learn more about it at thehealthyfat.com/Ross. I'll say that again, thehealthyfat.com/Ross. It's linked at the bottom of this video, but he'll teach you exactly how he's kept his weight off for free at thehealthyfat.com/Ross. And you can click in the description below. Now, let's introduce our guest, Uri Geller. Firstly, can I say, sir, welcome to Reality Check. It's an honor to have you with us.
Hey, Ross, thanks very much for having me on your news show. And I'm speaking from the Holy Land, Israel. I'm sitting in my museum. I do not live in the museum. And it's great to speak with you. Thanks for the incredible monologue. You should become my agent.
Let's roll back, Uri, to August 1973, which is 51 years ago this month. You were at SRI, Stanford Research Institute, in California doing experiments with Dr. Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ, where they were scientifically attempting to verify your paranormal perception abilities. And they did this under controlled scientific conditions. Do you recall those days?
Oh, absolutely. But I do have to backtrack a little back to Israel. You see, Mossad, the Israeli Secret Service, was very interested in my abilities, and they wanted to test me. But we're speaking about 1969. Mossad did not have the tools to test my brain. We're going back so many years. No tools to test Uri Geller. So what do? They call up the CIA and they ask for help. CIA is, wow, we definitely want to test Uri Geller. Let's get into America. Let's get into Stanford in Palo Alto. But they send a guy called Andrei Puharich to Israel to test me first, who was a medical doctor and quite a well-known scientist with ties to the CIA. And then I get a phone call and a letter from Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, the sixth man to walk on the moon. So that's how it developed towards Stanford Research Institute. And yeah, I do remember those days. They were very painful. I had to go through a battery of scientifically, controlled experiments, locked in shielded rooms, cameras filming me. You see, one of the experimenter beside Hal Puthoff was Russell Targ, who was actually an amateur magician. But we'll speak. Actually, let me show you this photograph. This is this is an amazing photo. This is Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, and this is them 51 years later. Incredible. Thanks. I thank my brother-in-law for bringing that, because in my museum I have all these incredible displays. Anyhow, I had to prove myself because I was already becoming controversial. I was already a controversial figure in Israel, but I realized that Ross, controversy was good for me. No matter what they said, as long as they spell my name correctly, was always fantastic. So I had to go through these tests. But what you have seen, the video that SRI released, or in the documents that were released to publication, that's, believe it or not, is a tiny piece, a tiny little experiment that they allowed to show. You have no idea, and I can't go there, but what else I've done there for the CIA. Unbelievable. Nevertheless, I do remember those days. Incredible. The scientists, Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, were really nice. Everything was, as I said, under controlled conditions. And then they had to admit that it's real, because it is real, Ross.
Did it feel like a vindication for you, Uri? I mean, you've spent a large part of your career being slagged off, frankly, as a charlatan and a fraud. And I'm not in a position to be able to make a judgment, but I know Hal Puthoff, Dr. Hal Puthoff, very well. I know Hal would never falsify data, neither would Russell Targ. And I can tell the audience how seriously SRI took this research, and that's revealed in the CIA documents that were declassified. they put you into an electronically shielded, isolated room, didn't they? It was essentially a Faraday cage. So there was no possibility of you being able to communicate with the outside.
Absolutely. You're right, Ross. Um, you could not. This was such tight control conditions. There is no way that someone could cheat or I mean, the things that they said about the shielded room were unbelievable. They even accused me. I think I have it here. They even accused me of having a transmitter up my tooth. Believe it or not. Wait a minute. Let me show it to you. By the way, I did not prepare all this. They are all around the area because this is my CIA Mossad area. Look, they claimed, and this comes from a very prestigious magazine called New Scientist. They claimed that I had a transmitter up my tooth and somebody was Morse coding me outside the shielded room. There was nobody from anyone from my team outside the shielded room. How ridiculous. I mean, if I really had, Ross, a transmitter up my tooth, it would be a bigger phenomenon than bending spoons with the power of the mind. Okay. So, so,
But
um,
one thing I do want to address, and we have to deal with this because I think it's important to give you the opportunity to respond to these claims. There was actually an article published in the very prestigious scientific journal Nature where two psychologists, one called Marks and another called Kamen, they flatly made an allegation that took me by surprise because I know how Hal operates. There's no way he or Russell Targ would have tolerated this. But the claim was that you were allowed to peek through a hole in the laboratory wall separating you from the drawings you were being invited to reproduce, and that these drawings were supposedly placed on a wall opposite the peephole that the investigators Targ and Puthoff had stuffed with cotton gauze. And when anybody watches the video, it's quite clear that what Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ were using was a controlled blind test. These images that you were remote viewing were actually in sealed, double sealed envelopes, weren't they?
yes, absolutely. This thing with the hole that you're talking about, Ross. I mean, you're talking to Superman, if so, or Flash Gordon, or Daredevil. If I had holes there, how did anyhow? Nonsense. I did it purely. Call it telepathy. Call it remote viewing. Call it whatever you want to call it. I sat in that shielded room and I duplicated the drawings. Some of them were so precise, Ross, like the bunch of grapes, 24 grapes. They drew 24 grapes. I got 24 grapes. Some of my
No,
drawings, yeah,
I don't want to be too brief with this because I think the grapes one is actually a very good example. So let's just go through this. They got a person to draw an image, a black and white image of, as kind of a skeleton image of a bunch of grapes. And there were 24 grapes in a particular configuration, in a particular shape. And what I found fascinating was that you actually got not only the shape, but the number of grapes.
yeah, well, I don't know how I did that, but I drew 24 grapes. I had no idea that their, bunch of grapes also had 24. This is just one set of experiments. Then there were many others conducted with a computer. So, for instance, the scientists themselves did not know, to the best of my recollection, what the computer chose to draw. So, in one experiment, the computer drew a kite, a kite with a tail and the ribbons. And I drew a kite, and this is coming from the mind of a computer. So apparently, whether it's remote viewing or telepathy or another strange, mysterious ability that we all have, probably, I managed to extract the kite out of a computer with no human being uh, around. The experimenter knows that the computer chose to draw a drawing of a kite.
I think what disturbs me as a journalist, Uri, is I don't know one way or the other about your skill set. But what I do find alarming is the dishonesty that has been referenced in some mainstream media reporting of your alleged skills, because there's been a flagrant misrepresentation of the SRI work. It was done with incredibly rigorous scientific controlled blind standards, wasn't it?
Of course, very much so. And otherwise, the CIA would have not published this. And then, Nature magazine wouldn't have touched it. Nature is one of the most prestigious scientific magazine in the world. But look, listen, Ross, hold on.
Nature, of course, was having a go at you because the two psychologists who wrote the piece for
Yeah,
Nature were suggesting it
give me
was
that.
bunkum. But
Wait, let me
what
show
I
you.
can to,
Hold on, Ross,
yeah,
because
I just want to draw you on something that the CIA made the finding that they considered you had demonstrated your paranormal perceptual ability in a convincing and unambiguous manner. And I think one of the things that you were doing that I found particularly impressive was when you were projecting or appearing to project a number into the mind of a human subject, and then they were writing it down, or the other way around. Can you just describe what you were being asked to do?
okay, since Ross, you can edit the show any way you want, let me just show you. This is also around me. Nature magazine, New Scientist, and New Scientist. So you must understand that when these publications come out with scientific articles, whether they're for Uri Geller or New Scientists who try to debunk Uri Geller, it's still unbelievably amazing. Now, to be able to transmit a thought into someone's mind, I believe is the same power, it's the same energy. Once again, maybe it is remote viewing, maybe it is telepathy. But the most successful one that I did with telepathy was when Kit Green, you know Kit Green, don't you?
I do. Yeah.
So Kit Green was sitting, I believe, in Langley, Virginia, and I
He was the
was.
head of, I think he was the head at the time of the Department or the Directorate of Science and Technology in the CIA. So he was kind of like the chief scientist for the CIA at the time.
Yes, and this is hundreds, not thousands of miles or kilometers away from Palo Alto. So he didn't quite believe in my abilities, and Hal Puthoff put him on the line. And Kid Green says to me, "Look, Uri, what can you do? Can you show me something?" And I just, we're talking about 51 years ago. There's no iPhone, there is no FaceTime, this is an old fashioned black phone. And I basically, he was holding a drawing, and I described the drawing. And above the drawing, in my own mind, I saw the word architecture. And that's exactly what Kid Green wrote on that page inside the book. It was a book about the anatomy of the body. So sometimes, if I have time, it depends how long I have. I can look into someone's eye and I can project a very simple, either a simple drawing or a number or a color. But this is no big deal. I think we all have telepathy, Ross, and I demonstrated it 51 years ago under laboratory controlled conditions. And what the skeptics said and the debunking, that only helped me, Ross. Listen, you're in show business. I bet right now that you get not tens, but hundreds of negative emails every week. Every week, someone tries to debunk you. Don't tell me that's not true.
That's
Every,
very true.
very
I
true.
can tell you,
Yeah,
I can tell you, as an investigative journalist that takes this subject seriously, you cop an enormous amount of attack.
yeah.
And the thing I find fascinating, Uri, is I do think that the mainstream media has dropped the ball in its coverage. It's allowed itself to be led by the nose because you and I both know, and I'm going to draw you on this, you and I both know that the CIA and other intelligence services are still playing with psychic phenomena. They call it something different. They call it psionic, but it's still happening.
Absolutely, it's happening. This thing about that the CIA stopped psychical research is nonsense. Why would they? This is a cheap method of spying on people, spying on governments. Remote viewing, you just get a bunch of remote viewers into a darkened room with computers in front of them, and they send their mind through space and time, and they bring back information, movements of submarine, nuclear weapons, etc. What happened? It went deep black. That's what happened. Why? Because the CIA, NSA, National Security Agency, they just didn't want the controversy around. They don't need that. So they are still using remote viewers, psychics, not only in America, but MI5, MI6, a few secret services, spying agencies of very major countries are using people like me.
So can I just take you through, Uri? I mean, I think a lot of people watching this, let's be kind to them. They've watched George Clooney in the Men Who Stare at Goats, and they're told that it's all they're told that General Arthur Stubblebine was an idiot, and that the whole CIA Operation Stargate program was based on self-delusion. The scientists were fooling themselves that they could walk through walls and that they could perform psychic abilities. Let's just talk through what you say you can do. What exactly is it that you believe you can do? And can you explain to me how can anyone do it if you believe people can do it?
Okay, Ross, look, I am surprised today. I'm actually amazed how I managed to drive spoon bending into world culture. I mean, it's world culture. Why? Look at the movies like George Clooney, The Matrix, Robert De Niro plays me, he tries to bend the spoon, big rock bands sing about me and spoon bending. It's just massive, still is. Unbelievable spoon bending. And I'll tell you why it caught and why it's still here. Because not everyone can bend a spoon, but a lot of people can. And when this phenomenon happens, it ignites controversy, debate, and amazement. And people want to explore the unknown. People want to taste the paranormal. And let me tell you this, that the skeptics are a tiny minority. They, in my opinion, they're a molecular nothing. All they did to me, to explain your viewers, without the James Randi or without a skeptic, I wouldn't be who I am today. They created the mystery around me. They created the debate, the anger. They created the fire. People, I mean, it was just a frenzy of skepticism against the paranormal, not only against me. So, to answer your question, even my children cannot bend spoons. My grandkids cannot bend spoons. But when I do a show here in my museum, when I do a tour in my museum, I tell that to people. Not everybody can do it, but I saw children here in the museum bending spoons in front of my very own eyes. No trickery involved. A real spoon was bent under my eyes. Look, Ross, the secret of success is originality. I created spoon bending. And when you see Keanu Reeves in The Matrix learning how to bend a spoon from a kid, and the child tells him there is no spoon, it's your mind that bends. That says it all. That one line in The Matrix says it all. So that's why I'm still around. Like you said, I'm 78. I have 3, 4 tours every day in the museum. I get thousands of emails from around the world. And Rob, you promised me you're not taking this out. I was even asked to come out with an Uri Geller alien tarot card. So this is coming out in October. You're leaving this. I'm plugging my tarot
Sure. No,
cards.
you can plug your tarot cards,
Thank
Uri.
you.
That's no problem.
And it's published by Watkins in England. Anyhow, Ross, did I more or less answer your question?
Well, I guess what I'd love to hear from you is what's going on in your mind when you are doing what you purport to be doing, which presumably is some kind of psychokinesis with the spoon bending.
Look, I'm so used to bending spoons that what I do is there's no more in my mind bend, bend. I don't even have to visualize a spoon bend. I do it because I've done it for 60 years. More. What am I? I was 6 years old when it first happened to me here in Israel, not far away, 4 miles away from here. My mother always thought that because we come from Sigmund Freud's family, if you didn't know that, my name is actually Uri Geller Freud. So I come from
Wow.
the great psychologist family, the Freud and Einstein. So my mother always thought maybe I inherited some powers from Sigmund Freud, but I don't think so. What is going in my mind is very simple. If I bend the spoon, I just will it to bend. It's kind of, I just do it. But when I was a child in school, I wanted it to happen. I focused. I visualized the spoon bending, and it happened. And today when I walk in the street, I'm actually tired of bending spoons. It's passe for me. It's gone, finished. I don't want to hear about spoon bending. So you know what I did, Ross? You're going to laugh now. But because when I walk in the street, whether it's in Germany or in London or here in Tel Aviv, people, hey, Yuri, can you bend a spoon for us? So look what I did. Something very easy. I have a spoon all the time on me. Watch this. See my arm here, Ross? See?
Yep.
One, two, three. Watch it bend. That's it. That's as far as
So, Uri, I want to take you back to your childhood because I watched a very early interview with you, and I haven't been able to find it in my research. And one of the things that I'm fascinated by is, as you probably know from this show, we talk very openly about UAPs. I strongly believe there is a phenomenon of unidentified anomalous phenomena that is probably non-human, that is engaging with this planet. And this is one of the things I want to talk to you about. I know you were very good friends at SRI and later with Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the former Apollo 14 lunar module pilot, who was a very close friend of a very good friend of mine. And Edgar confided in that friend that he really did believe that what you were doing was psychic powers. And he was mortified at the way that you were attacked by the skeptics and the debunkers over the years. But one of the stories that I understand you told him was that as a child, you had some kind of an encounter with a non-human craft that you believe endowed you with the skills you have today.
Okay, let me once and for all answer it the correct way. Because again, the skeptics, as you said, created, Uri Geller got his powers from aliens and so on, trying to kind of rubbish me with such a thought that my powers come from aliens. Okay, let me tell you exactly what happened. I think I was around 6 years old. I was playing in a magical Arabic garden opposite our apartment building. Suddenly, in front of my eyes, I see a sphere of light, and out of that sphere of light, in seconds, a almost like I'll describe it as a laser beam. A laser beam type of a ray emanates out of this sphere of light, hits my forehead, and it's tangible. It's so powerful that I'm pushed into the grass. I have no idea how long I lay there. But when I ran home to tell my mother, she thought I was dreaming or I was making the story up. Okay, this really happened to me, and I adhered to this story. I wrote about it in my books. I talked about it on hundreds, if not thousands, of TV shows. All right, I know it happened to me. Okay, about 15 years ago, one of a BBC documentary was playing in Israel about me, and I was telling this story. The next day, I get an email from a retired Israeli Air Force officer who says to me, Uri, I just saw your documentary. I must tell you this. I saw you in that Arabic garden. I was there. So you can imagine, I jumped on the phone and called him. His name is Abrahami. And I said, "What do you mean you were there?" And this is what he told me. He was walking on Rothschild Boulevard to his parents' apartment. And this garden was on his right. And he described me, little boy, white shirt, curly hair, black. And he described this incredible sphere of light. And he describes me running to my apartment building across the street. And this huge sphere of fire or light explodes on the facade of our apartment building. And the residue, he remembers something black was left on the face of the building. Wow. For me, this was a private validation that after so many decades of me telling this story with no backing up, no witnesses, I was stunned. And of course, I got together with him, I filmed him, and it is true. He saw me, and that's when it totally dawned on me and validated this occurrence of meeting some type of a phenomenon. Now, I do not know, Ross. I do not know if this was an alien encounter. I'm not 100% sure. I have my theories. I'm not sure if it was maybe a spiritual happening. Maybe it was a down to earth phenomenon. I have no idea. But when I met Puharich, when I met Edgar Mitchell, when I was taken to the Lawrence Livermore radiation labs where they build nuclear bombs, when I was taken to the American Naval Surface Weapons Center, and where Dr. Werner von Braun took me to a NASA secret location, and I enter a refrigerated room, everything kind of snapped back into my mind. And I said, yes, probably. This first encounter was alien in nature. That's all I can tell you. You can ask me whatever you wish now.
Okay, I'm really grateful you told me that story and put it and clarified it for us. One thing I wanted to double check with you is before you had that experience as around about a 6-year-old boy, were you manifesting any of the alleged paranormal powers that you subsequently developed? Or was it after that incident that you had those powers?
You're such a great journalist, Ross. You managed to instill the word allegedly. That's okay. I love you anyhow. So listen, um, the spoon bending, I believe, came after that encounter. Maybe 6.5 years old, I'm eating soup. And as I lift the spoon towards my mouth, the spoon starts bending and it broke in, fell into the soup. Then I realized that I have something that other kids don't. And I started developing this power in school. I would hold a broken watch, I'd reactivate it. I could move the hands of a clock on the wall. I would do telepathy. I basically sharpened this phenomenon. I don't even want to call it a gift because I don't really quite know where it comes from. But I believe that maybe that encounter could have, I'm careful, could have triggered this energy in my brain. But then there were other things that happened, like I stuck my finger into my mother's sewing machine and I was electrified. Then, when I was 1 year old, a British soldier shot 2 bullets into our window in Tel Aviv, and the glass fell and broke all over my body. So I had shocks while growing up. I guess I will never really know the truth whether that encounter in that magical Arabic garden was really aliens contacting me. I don't know.
You have spoken. I watched a major documentary that you did with, I think, the Gaia TV, where you spoke about how you feel you have a purpose and you feel very strongly that you've been imbued with a purpose with the gifts that you say that you've got. And what is that purpose? What do you think is your role here on planet Earth?
Yeah, okay. Don't make me a messiah or a prophet or some
No, no,
kind of
no.
a holy
I just
figure.
I don't want it to sound like that, but
Because
I'm intrigued. The reason I say this is because I'm kind of intrigued. I've met a lot of people who've had near death experiences. And I know that as a paratrooper, when you were fighting in the war, you came very close to getting killed. And I wonder, one of my next questions, and you might answer this in this answer, is do you believe that your powers, if if I can say that they are powers, I suppose I do have to use the word allegedly as a journalist to be objective, but do you believe that those powers have been enhanced because of your exposure to near death experiences?
That's a good question. I don't think I can answer that. I don't know. I don't know. But what I do know is that we all have a purpose. You have a purpose. I have a purpose. Everybody watching us now, you all, men, women, kids, you all have a purpose. You know, outside us in the universe, there is infinity. There's no end, no end to inner space, no end to inner space. In the phone that is filming you now, probably there are billions and billions of entities, and there's no end to outer space. And the last frontier is not outer space. The last frontier is our mind. So we are all here on this planet for a short while to do something positive, hopefully positive. And I don't see myself any different than you are or the people who are watching us now. I'm still a very down to earth person, born in Israel, and yes, became very famous because of something very freaky, something very strange, something that amazed and captivated hundreds of millions of people around the world, and still they're still captivated. So we all have a purpose. I believe that my little purpose was to open the minds of people who already believed in the paranormal. I don't give a F about the skeptics, really. I don't care about them. But I do care about people who are open minded and believers. And we all are believers at the end of the day. You put an atheist in an airplane that is crashing, they will probably shout, "Oh my God!" So it's within us, and I believe that the 60 years of entertainment again, the 60 years of entertainment that I gave around the world did something, and it moved something. Tens of thousands of books were written about the paranormal, and they still write books about the paranormal. I was the motivator. I was a catalyst. I was a trigger to something that is beyond our understanding or beyond our belief system.
The reason I ask this is because there are a lot of people, including people in defense and intelligence in the United States, who privately freely admit to me that they believe there is some kind of consciousness that lies at the heart of a lot of what we describe as the paranormal, and that it's been engaging with humanity for a very, very long time. And if I could describe what they say, they assert that the consciousness is increasingly manifesting itself to humans, that it's making itself more obvious, and that what it's trying to do is twig human consciousness. From what you're saying, you'd seem to agree with that analysis.
Very much so. You know, all this, the analysis really boils down to one very powerful and infinite equation by Albert Einstein. E equals mc square, where what Einstein actually proved to the world that everything is made from energy. You are energy, I'm energy, the people who are watching us are made from energy. We're energetic beings. What that means also, and which Albert Einstein continued to prove scientifically, that energy cannot be destroyed, which brings us into quantum mechanics, quantum entanglement, which you have to ask the question, am I now, Ross, am I creating you or you are creating me? It's mind boggling, it's mind blowing, the world of energy and consciousness. Uh, this is so beyond us. We're a tiny fragment in a sea of endless universe, a little grain of stone with our knowledge. It's beyond us to understand what really consciousness is. But what is happening, I believe, like you probably believe, is that we're being given signals by a higher, let me call it a higher being, if you want to call it God, or you want to call it some type of energy being out there in the universe. It's giving us signs. It's pushing us towards a bigger journey. You know, Carl Jung coined up a word synchronicity. Everything is synchronized in the universe. I'm sitting here talking to you, not because you wanted a show with Uri Geller, an interview, because of synchronicity, which means that everything that happens in the universe happens for a reason. There is a reason for this interview. Maybe we both don't know what it is, but it's triggering something. I think that's in a nutshell, it explains consciousness.
That's a very good explanation of what I was trying to extract from you, Uri. Now, listen, you've already flagged the other major incident in your career that touches on UFOs. And again, Edgar Mitchell has confirmed a large part of this story to my friend privately. During his lifetime, Edgar, the Apollo 14 lunar module pilot astronaut, was unwilling to say publicly that he'd ever had definitive proof of alien life. But privately, he confided in friends, and I've reported this in my book, that he was aware when he had experiences on the moon, he was aware that they were being observed. And he talked to my friend about blue lights that were clearly some kind of structured craft that were following the astronauts during their time in their lunar journey. But he also talked privately to people about something that happened, I believe, at the Goddard Space Center with Werner von Braun, the father of America's space program, the former Nazi, who I understand embraced you as a friend, even though I'm sure as an Israeli Jew, you must have felt very uncomfortable with his background. But it must have been a very interesting meeting. And I'm intrigued if you can tell me, please, the story of what transpired between you and Dr. Werner von Braun.
Okay, first of all, what Edgar Mitchell described you on the moon, that's a tiny thing. Yes, they were followed, but the big thing is, and Edgar says it outright, that a UFO, a craft, crashed on planet Earth. They pulled out bodies of aliens. And that's what Werner von Braun wanted to show me. This is a photograph of Werner von Braun and me. He's taking me into his limo, and we drive off to a huge concrete building. But let me now backtrack. One day, Ed Mitchell calls me up and says to me, Uri, there's a very important doctor who wants to meet with you. I say, fine. He says he's a NASA scientist. I say, fine. Who is he? He says to me, he's Dr. Werner von Braun. I say, what? Dr. Werner von Braun wants to meet me. Dr. Werner von Braun was a Nazi. I've got photographs in the museum here. He's among Gestapo officers. I was shocked when Ed Mitchell told me that, but I couldn't resist. No way. So in the end, with some conflict in my mind, because half of my family were murdered by Nazis, I say to Ed, take me. We get to a NASA base, and by the way, at that time I worked with the CIA, and the CIA gave me a tiny Minox German camera. It's also hanging here on the wall, because I spied for the CIA in Mexico, because I was very close to the president of Mexico, and the CIA gave me some missions to do in Mexico. I take that little camera with me, and I give it to my brother-in-law. And I say to Shippy, his name is Shippy, short for Samson. I say to him, Shippy, when we enter Werner von Braun's office, you've got to snap a photo, because nobody will believe me. So we enter Werner von Braun's office. Mitchell is with me, Shippy is with me, and there was a CIA man with us too. The first thing that Werner von Braun does, he pulls out of his pocket a tiny little piece of metal, and Shippy snaps. And Werner asks me, to touch the metal and tell him what I feel it is. So I place my finger on the piece of metal and I tell him, Werner, this is not from here. He says, you're right. This is a piece of a UFO. Okay, wow. Then he says to me, come with me. He takes me into his private office, and there is a safe in the office. He opens the safe, and inside there's a bigger piece of metal, about this big, maybe 12 inches. He holds it in his hand, and he says to me, Uri, now place your hand on the piece of metal. Tell me what you feel now. So I place the palm of my hand on the piece of metal, and I immediately tell him, Werner, this is from a UFO. And he says, you're right. Now come with me. He takes me out to the parking lot, and this is the photo. It's an enhanced photo. Somebody made it, more color. And he puts me in a limo, says, sit next to me. I sit next to him. He gives an order to the driver to drive. We drive into the heart of the base. We come to a concrete building. Nothing is written on the building. There's a soldier standing by the door. He opens the door, and Werner says to me, "Follow me." We go down 3 or 4 flights of floor into the abyss of the building.
Is it just you?
No, just me and Werner von Braun. Then in the corridor of that 3rd or 4th floor, there are hooks on the wall, and on the hooks are hanging orange Antarctica coats. You know those warm coats that you wear in Antarctica? They're
Sure.
orange in color, but they all had a NASA logo on. He says, put one on. And he puts one on. I don't know what the hell is going on. And then we turn around the corner. We come to a huge metal door. He opens the door, and I see an enormous refrigerator. It's cold. I walk into this cold space, and listen, Ross, I'm definitely not an idiot, and I definitely was not hypnotized. With my own eyes, I see alien bodies. Some were mangled. They're all in glass tubes. I mean, I'm just mind blown, shocked. I was stunned. I froze, and it suddenly everything dawned on me in that refrigerator room that this is all real. Everything that I believed in, it's all real. What this is this
Can you describe those bodies to me?
very similar to the alien figures that we are used to see, the grays. Look, most of them were mangled. Yeah, most of them were. They looked like they were pulled out forcefully out of a craft, or just, I don't know, found strewn around the UFO. But it was mind blowing. Just, I mean, that's
Did
the.
what did Werner tell you about where those beings came
He
from?
didn't. He didn't. We went back to the office. Ed Mitchell was there. Werner gave me a gift. He gave me It's here. I have the camera here. It's a German camera. He said, Uri, you can have this as a gift. I took it because I said I wanted something that belonged to Werner von Braun, and that was the end of the story. So, but it happened.
Did it?
You know,
Did
understand that this is
Yeah.
what I'm astonished at. That this is 50 years ago, Ross. 50 years ago, and the Americans are still sitting on this secret. What's the big
It's
deal?
funny. As we're talking, my friend, just in the last few days, I've interviewed the former UFO investigator for the Pentagon, Luis Elizondo. And he's gone public with me on an interview with NewsNation where he's talked about the fact that the Roswell crash in 1947 was the crash of a UFO. And he described bodies being recovered,
There you go.
alien bodies
Hey,
being recovered from the craft.
yeah, by the way, Ross, let me just grab this piece of paper because there are some names here that I don't know if the name June Crane brings. Did you ever hear of June Crane?
Yes, I do. She was a secretary who allegedly witnessed quite a bit.
Yeah, because
I don't want to lead you.
she was Werner von Braun's secretary, and she held the same piece of metal I held. Then there was, there was Carol Sue Rosin. Carol
I've met
Surosin.
Carol. Yes, I've met
So
Carol,
she was a
and
spokeswoman.
Carol told me the story when I met her in 2021 that Verner warned her that one of the things that was going to be used was the claim that aliens were a threat, and for that reason we needed to militarize our response to the alien threat. And Dr. Werner von Braun allegedly told Carol Rosen that we should be very skeptical of such a claim. Did he ever talk to you about that?
Mitchell talked to me about that. First of all, there's no doubt in my mind that the aliens who are visiting us now, or maybe even are already among us, they are peaceful because if they were hostile, do you remember the movie called Independence Day? I mean,
Sure.
if they were hostile, if they were negative, if they wanted to destroy us, our planet, we would have been destroyed a long time ago. I mean, these craft travel in velocities that we have no idea how they manifest, how they travel through space and time, how they come, how they land here. Their technology is way, way, way beyond us. And their weapons, probably, if they do have weapons, we would have been wiped off the planet a long time ago. If now there are, in my opinion, this is not the only one species or race of aliens that visit us. Maybe there is another one. Maybe there are two or three that visit us. But maybe because they travel through different dimensions, I don't know if I make sense, but maybe one a set of alien species cannot see the other because it's all again going down to quantum entanglement, quantum mechanics, dimensional universe. So we know very little about their technology, but we are trying to weaponize the little technology that we pulled out of the craft that crashed. I'm not sure that it was a Roswell crash. Maybe there were other crash UFOs. There was one in Brazil. The stories of crash UFOs, dozens and dozens that are real, bona fide, true crashes. So maybe the American government is still sitting on this top secret, not showing the bodies because they're still trying to build some type of a technological know-how to use for their own military purposes coming from an alien race.
Can I just draw you on why you think Dr. von Braun gave you that insight? I mean, if what you're telling is accurate, Uri, and I've heard indirectly from people who spoke to Edgar Mitchell that he believed your account and that he was present on that day. Why would Dr. Werner von Braun reveal to you what is absolutely, if it's true, the biggest secret in the US government?
Oh, it's the biggest secret on Earth. It's the biggest secret in the universe. I came up with a theory. Okay, he was a Nazi. He was not a direct, person that was involved in murdering Jews, but he knew about it. He saw it with his own eyes, and maybe
People definitely died at Peenemünde, where he was testing his missiles. I mean, there was slave labor
okay.
in the missile rocketry place where he was building his rockets. So, no, there's no doubt at all that people died under the control and leadership of Dr. von Braun. And I don't doubt for a moment, by the way, that he achieved great things in the American space program. But um,
So
as um,
let me
as
answer.
has been revealed in Operation Paperclip,
Yeah.
it was a very big scandal that these people were allowed to come to America.
Yes. So let me answer my theory. Let me tell you my theory. Maybe his guilty feelings about what happened in the Third Reich and what Hitler did to the Jews. And when Mitchell told him, "Hey, I know Uri Geller. We've studied Uri Geller. He's been at Stanford. He's been in all these government laboratories." I have a feeling that it was Werner Braun that told Mitchell, "I want to meet Uri Geller because I'm Israeli, because I'm Jewish, because I come from the Holy Land." By the way, um, he was, I don't know if you know this, but he did believe in God. Did you know this?
I didn't know. No.
yeah, we had a conversation about Israel and so on, very short conversation, but because he had these guilty feelings, he wanted to give back something to me. That's I have no other answers. I don't know. Maybe Mitchell convinced him to tell me, to show me. I know one thing for sure: the bodies are still somewhere. Maybe they've been moved from Goddard to other secret places, their locations, but the bodies are there. And one day they're going to be revealed, no doubt. Maybe I'll be dead and gone by then, and they will say, "Oh, Uri Geller, remember Uri Geller? He saw those bodies."
Did Werner von Braun make any admissions to you that they'd recovered solid craft, intact, non-human craft?
Well, he showed me. I have photographs here of the items he's showing me, which he said that they come from a UFO, and they were solid, they were tangible. I touched them. So probably in his office, he had a collection of pieces of, I don't know what it's made out of, whether it's an alloy or something that we've never heard about before, some type of a material that comes from the universe. And yeah, for sure, that craft was crashed. I don't know what happened to the major body of the craft, but it's stored somewhere. Of course, it's stored somewhere.
Can I ask you this? Edgar Mitchell told my friend that the facility where you were taken was at the Goddard Space Center, south of Washington, D.C. Is that where you were?
I can't answer that.
Fair enough. That's fine. Have you, since that experience, ever had any other confirmations of non human intelligence engaging with this planet?
From whom? From you mean?
Well, I'm going to draw you. There's a very famous Israeli former head of the Israeli space
Oh
program
yeah,
called Haim Eshed. Have you ever met Haim Eshed?
I can't talk about that, but I can tell you one thing. I can tell you this. High Meshed is no fool. He's a highly intelligent man. You know what he did. He was the head of the space security of Israel, and that's big deal. I mean, to be at that position, you got to go through everything. So, what Haim wrote in his book is, in my opinion, is absolutely true, um, and that's as much as I can tell you. There are certain
And
key figures in the American government that know about this, and of course, key figures in Israel know about it. And then there is another Harvard scientist, Loeb. You know about him, right?
I've interviewed Avi Loeb recently, and just for the benefit of our audience that might not know what we're talking about. Haim Eshed, the father of the Israeli space program, gave an extraordinary interview to a Hebrew language newspaper a few years ago, and he's since disappeared from sight. But in that interview, he acknowledged that he had been briefed into the legacy program on non human intelligence, aliens, by the American government, and that he was aware that there was collaboration between the Israeli government and the American government on issues related to non human intelligences. And he basically acknowledged that there'd been recovered craft and that there was a secret program. And he actually went into even more detail about an alleged secret space program, which I have to admit, even I'm very skeptical about. But I'd love to know what you've got to say about that, Uri.
I can't really elaborate on this simply because I know too much and I don't want to cross a red line. Uh,
Can I ask you this then? Why do you think there is so much secrecy? Don't we, as human beings, have the right to know what I do believe is the case, which is that the United States, Israel, the UK, probably Canada, probably not my country, Australia, I suspect France, I know Russia and I know China all know that there are non human intelligences engaging with this planet and that we have recovered some of their technology. Why do you think? Can I invite you to speculate for me? Why is this being suppressed? Why can't we at least know that there are these non human intelligences? I appreciate Just like we can't know about how to make a nuclear bomb, there may be technologies that need to be protected. But why can't the president just be bloody honest with the public and tell them what he knows?
It's not down to the president. It's down to the armed forces in America. We're talking about NSA, National Security Agency. We're talking about the CIA. We're talking about, there are reasons. There are reasons. And most people will tell you, "Oh, we're not ready yet. We're going to be freaking out when we find out that it's all true." But that's not the main reason. There is a major reason here, and it's to do with the major forces, the governments around the world. Ross, do you realize that as we sit here now, there are thousands of nuclear missiles aimed at America, aimed at Russia, aimed at Israel? There are thousands of nuclear bombs moving around the planet in aircrafts right now flying. There are right now, as we speak, there are airplanes that have nuclear bombs on them. There are submarines with nuclear weapons. There are trains moving all around Russia with nuclear bombs or nuclear missiles ready to be fired off. I believe, and this is as much as I will tell you, there is a reason attached. The alien situation, why we're not coming out with it, is attached to the worldwide security. Because if one missile is going to be fired, Ross, that is the end. That's World War III. We're finished. And there is a connection to that.
Can I draw you on that though? Because I would have thought that if nations were more honest with each other about the fact that there are these non-human intelligences zipping around in faster than light craft, or certainly craft that can do things that our technology can't do, I would have thought the best way to deconflict and avoid nuclear war would be to let each other know that these beings exist and that there are these craft that might be inadvertently detected on radar systems and mistaken for for an enemy attack.
Look, Ross, I will end this amazing interview with you for the news. Is that if I was the president of America, or if I was, I don't know, chairman of China, or if I was a Putin in Russia, I would definitely push and drive to release this information. But well, there are certain things that I cannot talk about. You people watching me right now, you have to use your imagination. Why this is still a secret? There is a reason for it. Hopefully,
Okay.
someday soon it'll be known. But listen, Ross, it was a pleasure speaking to you.
Can I just can I get one final question? Because I
Sure,
know
of
you'll want to tell
course.
me the story. One final question. You were taken by the CIA to Lawrence Livermore Laboratories, and this is on the nuclear issue. And you were invited to use your mind to see if it was possible to manipulate the trigger mechanism for a nuclear weapon, which to me sounds like an absolutely insane idea. But Yuri, tell me what happened.
It's absolutely not insane idea. I probably there'll be a movie based on that very soon. Um, Listen, I'll tell you something. I'll get back to this, but I'll tell you something even more unbelievable. NSA, which is the National Security Agency, when MI5, MI6 were involved in testing me in London, I managed to dematerialize a tiny little object from point A to point B. Point B was over another room across the wall. They got that information to NSA. NSA figured out that if I can do that, they could probably train a few psychics to erase a Russian city. A Russian city. And this is not science fiction. If you Google this story, it's on my website. My website is urigeller.com. You will freak out that this is absolutely true. They trained people like me to erase cities off the planet. Now, let's go back to the Lawrence Livermore Radiation Labs. I believe that there was an alien encounter there, an alien intervention. When I did certain things, scientists were not freaking out, they were hallucinating. Ross, we're talking about not one person, a few scientists. They were hallucinating. What made them hallucinate? The best description is Annie Jacobson's book, Phenomenon. You got to get that book or check my website, urigeller.com. Something happened in that laboratory that was beyond me. To this day.
What were they seeing?
They were seeing, listen, birds. It's incredible. Listen, Ross, you've got to visit my website, all of you. And don't forget my one more plug. If you want to know how to contact aliens, you must get my new tarot pack. By the way, I donate. I don't live from these things. I donate most of it to sick children. So it's a great cause. There's a charity in Israel called Save a Child's Heart. And
Uri, you've been incredibly kind with your time, and I know you're very, very good with charity. I've seen your work with young children. You're a very good man, and thank you so much for sharing your time with us, sir.
Thank you, Ross, and you continue being such a great, powerful journalist, because you're really brilliant, and I love all the shows that you do.
Thank you. All the best.
Shalom.
Mate.
Bye.
Shalom. Hello and welcome back to Reality Check. Well, this week we've got something special. You might remember back in December 2019, President Trump signed into law appropriations bills that authorized the creation of what's called the Space Force. And intriguingly, this is the sixth and newest service in the armed forces, and we know very little about it. It's obviously been ruthlessly and very successfully lampooned by Steve Carell on a Netflix series. But my colleague, journalist Braun, has had the privilege of getting access to a Space Force facility operated at the Peterson and Schriever Air Force Base in Colorado. And I'm dying to know whether Brian got a ride in the Air Force's secretive X-37B, and I'm most interested to know, what is Space Force all about? Before I bring Brian on, let's have a look at the package he's prepared.
From the outside, it may look like any other military base, but getting onto this base was no easy task. We had to be accompanied by badge-carrying officials and driven in a military van onto base. Once on base, we were only allowed in pre-approved locations. We're quickly reminded how serious these men and women take their roles.
The celebrity of it was really fun early on. Now, it's very challenging because you have to know a lot of things, and there's a lot of interest that we have as a nation in space, and protecting those interests is a difficult job.
A part of that job is keeping track of every single thing floating around in space, from satellites to even an astronaut's toolbox.
Each piece, thousands, tens of thousands of objects, has a piece. We have to see all those objects all the time. We have to maintain track of all those objects all the time.
Our day started at the aggressor barn. From the outside, it looks like a garage, but when we walk in, we were greeted with a tiki bar and photos, almost a man cave kind of feel. But walk a few feet back and you quickly begin to realize this is anything but a hangout. The servicewomen and men who greet us there are called aggressors, and they explain this space is a tribute to the exclusive group of service members who have served here before.
A lot of the heritage of being aggressors is we act like the bad guys in exercises, right? So we draw on some of the heritage of our great power competitors like Russia and China, and we really root our activities to replicate their threats.
We're greeted by members of several branches of the U.S. military. Navy, Marine Corps, Army, Air Force, and Space Force uniforms can be seen in the main area at the aggressor barn. Not unusual on many bases, but it's a reminder of exactly how big the role of Space Force, the youngest child, if you will, of the armed forces, plays in all branches. Like the Marine Corps historically was born out of the U.S. Navy, Space Force was born out of the Air Force, as more of a specialized focus that goes beyond traditional U.S. airspace.
That we ever go to conflict, all of our guys have already seen what's going to happen, they train against it, that they know how to defeat.
We're given an in-depth presentation from aggressors about the history of the aggressors, which dates back to the 1970s, After the U.S. lost many of their air-to-air battles in Vietnam, the aggressors were created as a more in-depth training for pilots. Think of this as the equivalent of the Navy's Top Gun program. Their goal? To replicate the technology our enemies use against us.
We try to bring that intelligence to life and make it real for our own friendly forces.
The Space Force aggressors show us how, with somewhat basic, inexpensive equipment, our adversaries can block satellite signals. They turn this machine on, and the Garmin GPS I'm holding suddenly goes dead.
So basically, with $10,000 worth of equipment, an adversary could take out GPS equipment.
Yes, over an entire area. They could take out an entire airport for just a few $1,000s.
And more sophisticated equipment can do even more damage. Then we head outside, where we see some of the most important weapons the Space Force has in their arsenal: satellites.
There's been exponential growth from our adversaries in the last decade.
China, Russia, or even more primitive adversaries like terror groups can, and some have tried before, to block our satellite signals that beam back important surveillance images. Stopping that, which Space Force does and does well, is why they are so important to every branch of the military and for every single American. Remember, satellites power our phones, our power grids, pretty much everything, making space the next potential battlefield worldwide.
I think the next war will be cyber and space.
What does a war in space look like? I mean, when I hear space in a war, it's kind of freaky.
It's not just, war in space and aliens coming and, people shooting like Star Trek and something like that, but their everyday life could change. Can you imagine not being able to access your money at all on your phone, or even your phone not working at all, having no access to your phone? Our whole lives could change.
So, Brian, thank you so much for joining us. Did the Air Force give you a ride in the X-37B? And what on earth do they mean by Space Force?
I wish, Ross, we would have gotten a ride in it. No, we've been trying for quite some time, probably 3 or 4 months, to get onto a Space Force base. And you can imagine with the military, there was all sorts of back and forth and hoops to jump through and background checks. And we finally got onto those bases in Colorado. We didn't get a ride, but we did get to see, it was interesting access to see sort of behind the scenes of what they do. And of course, you only get to see the things that they want to show you. I mean, you know how frustrating it can be doing some of these military stories because it's a very controlled environment, but it was still really eye-opening.
So one of the things that intrigued me off the top is there was a young Space Force officer you interviewed called Devin Rushing, who's what's called a Delta II weapons officer. Now, as I understand it, my friend, there's an outer space treaty that forbids the use of weapons in outer space. What on earth is Space Force doing talking about weapons? What's this reference to weapons all about?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's the first question I asked him too. Like, what exactly does your title mean? It all sounds very sci-fi, almost like out of a movie. When they say weapons officer, it's sort of like a generic term. It's kind of weird, but it doesn't actually refer to specific weapons. At least that's what they say. And they won't talk about having any weapons in space. Like I said, there's a ton of like confidential behind the scenes stuff that they weren't allowed to talk about, but they're not acknowledging any weapons in space. And when I asked him what the title meant, he said, oh, it's more of just a generic term. And it doesn't mean anything about a specific weapon or anything. But they did say in terms of like war in space, they do believe that the next world war will be in outer space and fought in space. They were very clear about that, which is why, it's now the sixth branch of the military in the U.S., why they say it's so important, Space Force.
Yes, I saw your interview there with the Chief Master Sergeant, who said, I think the next war will be cyber in space. And then she went on to say, it's not just war in space and aliens coming.
Yeah.
People shooting like Star Trek. What do you mean, not just? I'm having a bit of fun here, but really, it appeared to contemplate the possibility that part of this is being prepared for the possibility of engagement with something else.
Yeah, it's interesting. I went into this really wanting to get the answer to that question. Of course, I've followed all of your UFO reporting and done a little bit of it myself. And I was very interested in what they knew about UFOs because they have surveillance in space really unlike anyone else. I mean, they can see, again, they'll only tell us so much, especially when it comes to the equipment and the satellites they have. But, they say they can see 22,000 miles, maybe even more into space. And they've got an entire unit of Space Force. Their entire job around the clock, 365 days a year, is just monitoring space and monitoring every single little object that they can see. So, of course, I was interested in, like, do you ever see unidentified objects out there? And they were very quick to shut me down. They do not want to talk at all about UFOs or aliens or anything like that. They just kept going back to their entire mission being national defense and threats on Earth, like mainly like China and Russia.
So they're not denying it. They didn't categorically deny that they're seeing anomalous objects in space. They just didn't answer the question.
Yeah, they didn't deny it. And it's interesting. We went to the one base where their entire job is surveillance. That's their entire unit. And they've got they call them sensors that they monitor everything that they can see happening in space. And I asked them, like, is there ever anything you see that you can't identify, you're not sure what it is? Because they catalog all the items that they see. And they said even something as small as like a wrench or a bolt that came off of the space station years ago, they've got cataloged and they're tracking so they can see even really, really small objects. And I said, is there anything you come across ever that you can't identify? And they said, no, we haven't had that happen, which, again, I mean, I think not that they were coached on what they could say to me, but they were definitely very guarded. And it's hard to believe that they're able to identify every single little object out there. But the one officer who I spoke to said that everything that they had seen, they were able to put into some kind of category.
I'm fascinated that they gave you the access, Brian, and I'm actually, they're very good sports in doing this because NewsNation has been giving the Air Force particularly a very hard time, and this is an organisation that's spun off from the Air Force. But let's talk about the detail of what they're really preparing for, because their mission, let's be honest about it, their mission is fundamentally to prepare for the awful possibility of a confrontation, an international confrontation that, as you say, goes into space. We did a story recently on Reality Check where we interviewed a Major General Roger Teague, who's very senior in Space Command, and he was talking about how the satellite command control systems that we have in place, that we've had in place since the 1950s, simply aren't enough for the job. And there is a growing concern about the bellicose statements being made by the Russians, implying that they're working on some kind of anti-satellite technology. And you might recall back in February, John Kirby, the National Security Council spokesman, he talked about the fact that there is indeed some new weapon in development by the Russians. We don't know if it's nuclear or not. We don't know anything about it. And the White House was very quick to play this down. But he did talk about the awful possibility that the Russians are developing some kind of new space anti-satellite weapon. Clearly, a large part of the role of Space Force is to monitor space debris that's being caused by, things like, as you say, an astronaut's toolbox falling out of an astronaut's pocket. But clearly a large part of the problem is space debris. Why is space debris a problem? What did they say to you about that?
Well, space debris is an issue because it could interfere or destroy or damage our satellites, which you go back to. I mean, you think about the satellites now, what an integral part they are in terms of our national defense. And if there was a war, everything for the most part is controlled by satellite now, whether it be the missiles, the aircraft carriers, GPS on the planes, even communication for our soldiers, out in the field, when they're in conflict. So if one of our adversaries was able to take out a satellite or have some kind of technology to interfere with our satellites, they could take down all of those systems, which would, be a major issue for the military. So that from what they tell me, that's really Space Force's number one mission and concern, is figuring out how to fight back against that, keeping an eye. I mean, there's been reports, you mentioned Russia, there's been reports even within the last couple of months of China launching something into space that they weren't exactly sure what it was. At least that's what they're telling us. Could it have been some kind of new technology to try to take down satellites? That's the kind of thing that Space Force told us that they're most concerned with. And they call them guardians instead of like soldiers. They're called guardians. And they took us into a few warehouses where they showed us some of the technology that they're developing to be able to counteract some of those. They call them like GPS jamming devices that would take down the communication equipment.
Now, that was very interesting because I think they actually demonstrated to you how easy it is to disrupt the satellite communication signals that allow the receipt of GPS signals. How easy is it? What did you see?
Yeah, it's very easy. I mean, they have the equipment there that our adversaries would have, and even some basic equipment that like rogue terror groups could use. I mean, it looked pretty basic. I mean, it's like old radio equipment, it looks like. And so they have it there so that they can study it and figure out how to fight back against it. And so they had me hold like a Garmin GPS and showed me that when they turned some of this equipment on, it literally jammed the GPS signal. So it even goes beyond space. I mean, obviously, they're worried about China and Russia having really advanced technologies where they could interact with our satellites. But even on the ground, there's jamming equipment, they say, that our adversaries have. And again, even smaller terror groups and not even that organized of groups have, that they can use on the ground, point towards like a group of soldiers or even like an aircraft carrier that can actually try to jam the satellite signal from the ground, which, as you can imagine, would be a huge issue.
Look, it's quite understandable too that a lot of what we're talking about in Space Force is surrounded in secrecy, because what we are really talking about is the awful probability that in the event of some international confrontation, the first thing that any foreign adversary would do is to try to take out our satellite infrastructure. And it's funny, I didn't realize until I did this story a few weeks ago on Reality Check, interviewing Major General Roger Teague, just how vulnerable we are. I mean, even the communications we're having right now are probably going through satellite technology. Most of the internet, phones. I mean, it's extraordinary how dependent we are on this technology now and how vulnerable we are.
It is. I mean, when you think about it, and I thought a lot about it after I went out to the Space Force base, and I hadn't really thought about it either. But obviously, national defense is one thing, but all of our banking systems go through satellite. Power grids are controlled through satellite for the most part. You go to the ATM, you go to check out at the grocery store, all of that. You try to use the GPS in your car. So if someone was able to take out any of those key satellites up in space, they could disrupt everything. And that's why it's so important. And you mentioned, I mean, Space Force is new. It came around in 2019 under the Trump administration. There was a part of the Air Force that was doing this work before, but it's so important now that it needed to become its own sixth branch of the military. And it's interesting, it got kind of politicized. People kind of made fun of it that weren't fans of Trump. And you mentioned the Steve Carell show. And you Google it on YouTube, there's all sorts of parodies of Space Force. But when I was doing my research for this story, even as far back as former President Bush and Obama, they were all trying to create this new branch of the military. It had been in the works for decades. They all realized how important it was. It just finally came to fruition under former President Trump.
I have to say, they're cool uniforms. I like the Delta.
Yeah.
What does the Delta patch mean? Do you have any idea what the Delta patch signifies?
They've got a ton of different cool patches, and there's different deltas, and each one has a different sort of meaning depending on what exactly they do. But even walking around the building, I was like, who designed these patches? And there's even like it almost looks like cartoons on the walls. It's really interesting, and it's a really different feel than the rest of the military. And I've done stories, I think, pretty much with every branch of the military. And Space Force is a totally different feel. It almost almost has like a nerdy, I don't mean that in a negative way at all, but almost like a nerdy aspect to it. There's a lot of engineers, there's a lot of people with advanced degrees working there, and you get that feel when you're there. It was really, really interesting.
It's interesting, you know, one of the things I've done in the past was I embedded with American forces at a place called Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq. And when I was doing my preliminary research before I spoke to you, I looked and saw that the first combat operations that the Space Force were involved in was the detection and tracking of the Iranian missiles that were actually fired on the Al-Assad airbase. And I've got friends who were there at the time, and I know how grateful they were that there was early warning. I mean, there were still casualties, sadly, as a result of that attack. But it's very interesting because I think there's a tendency, and I'm guilty of this, there's a tendency to think that Space Force is something that's easily lampooned and that it's a bit of an indulgence to start talking about having a force in space when we're not even talking about a war in space. But it's quite clear that when they're talking about combat operations, what they're also looking at are things like terror groups. I mean, the Houthis in Yemen who are firing missiles at boats in the Red Sea. We're worrying constantly, of course, about North Korea potentially testing new weaponry out over the sea towards Tokyo and other places. And it's quite obvious. For example, here in Australia, we have enormous facilities in Western Australia that are part of this Space Force monitoring system for space debris. And my sources tell me anomalous objects. So whether they're being candid with you or not, Brian, I'm very sure that they are picking up what are called fast walkers. You didn't hear that term being used around the traps in the Space Force headquarters?
No, and again, you know, we were in such an controlled environment. I mean, they only had, you know, high-ranking officials available to talk with us, and you mentioned the coverage we've done in the past. I mean, I think they kind of knew that that question was coming, and they were very quick to sort of shoot me down and say, no, our main, you know, focus is national defense. They don't seem to want to talk about the UFOs, but the capabilities are amazing. I mean, they can clearly see a lot out there, and probably stuff that they don't want to talk about. And when I went to the base, you know, you kind of have this vision in your head of Space Force, and there's going to be like little space shuttles, and they're, you know, launching up to look for moon men. But it's interesting. It's not like other branches of the military where you would see tanks or you would see planes. It's a lot of computers. It's big control centers where they're looking at big screens, because most of the devices they use and the sensors are up in space. So, you know, you would never know looking at the outside of these buildings that there's all these people inside in uniform, basically sitting at computers in these big control centers, just spending 24 hours a day monitoring screens for the most part.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I respect the fact that there's a lot of things they can't talk about for national security reasons. And look, I'm very sure we do need a Space Force, because it's quite clear that the Russians particularly, but also the Chinese, have been experimenting with anti-satellite weaponry. And General John Raymond, who I think was a previous commander of Space Force, he spoke out a couple of years ago saying that the Russians had experimented with literally maneuvering some kind of mobile satellite in between two communications satellites. It's quite clear that our potential foreign adversaries are experimenting with and testing technologies in space that are raising very serious concerns. And I think one of the problems in telling this story for Space Force is they don't want to show their hand to a potential foreign adversary, but at the same time, they want to raise public awareness by talking to good reporters like yourself that this is indeed a potential threat. It's a delicate balance for them, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I felt for some of them when we were at the Guardian barn, they called it, where they showed us that equipment. I mean, you could tell they were being really, really careful about even talking about Russia and China. They wanted to be careful about what they said, what they knew, what words they used, because it's, you know, it's something they're dealing with every single day in terms of what. And I even mentioned, well, I've read articles, you know, there's published reports where this certain thing was launched a couple months ago, and they still didn't want to talk about it. But they're in a tricky position because they want to be taken seriously, and they should, because it's pretty clear. Hopefully we won't have another war ever, but the chances of that are slim, that it is going to be a war that involves space, and what they do is so important, and they want to get that out there, and they want to educate the American public and the world. But at the same time, and they know about all the jokes too, by the way. I mean, again, you just Google Space Force and people make fun of them. So they want to set the record straight, but they have to be so careful about what they say, because all parts of the military are classified in one way or another. But I think with Space Force, it's even to the next level, because it's such an emerging space, and the technology that they are developing is so different and emerging, that I feel like for them it's even more. They have to be even more careful and secretive.
It's funny though. I mean, I just wanted to maybe finish with asking you the question about the name of the squadron that you visited. They're called the Space Aggressor Squadron.
Yeah.
What are the implications behind that term? Is the term aggressor a throwback, or is it something that's designed to hint about what their role is?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Kind of like you said, the gentleman with the weapons title. It's the same kind of thing they explained to me, and it's a throwback. It's not because aggressive. And they talk about space warfare, and you think of like weapons, and you hear the term aggressor, and you think about them being aggressive. And no, they say that again is just the title, and doesn't refer to like anything specific that they're doing in terms of like any kind of aggressive behavior. And again, there's only so much they could tell us. But from what they'll say publicly, there are no like weapons per se that they're operating actually in space right now.
Well, they're not allowed to under the Outer Space Treaty.
Yeah.
But I think to be fair to Space Force and Space Command, it's quite obvious there is a growing concern that the Russians and the Chinese are potentially moving towards breaching the Outer Space Treaty, which was signed, I think, back in 1967. So very, very good reasons for why the Space Force has been created. And as I've said, there are people I talk to here in Australia, people in my government, who are very proud of the role that Australia plays in helping the detection of space objects. And there are arrays that have been erected right across Western and Southern Australia to actually assist in this work. And I think there's a huge amount of pride here in Australia that as part of the Five Eyes Alliance, we're feeding information, intelligence from space into Space Force and other commands, including Space Command. So I think your trip was a very fruitful and interesting one, Brian, and thank you very, very much for talking to us about it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Ross. It's always nice to see you.
Good on you. Nice to talk to you. So full marks, frankly, to Space Force for giving Brian Enton the access that he did get. It's important that I think we do acknowledge there is important work to be done in space, albeit a lot of it shrouded in national security secrecy and the importance of not upsetting potentially our foreign adversary rivals. So before I go today, there are a few viewer questions that have come in, and we always like to try and respond to our audience. So I'm going to knock off a few of those. One viewer asks me, I mysteriously know about the atomic atmospheric test and its ramifications. Why does a former senior general not know? I think that's a reference to Major General Roger Teague when I was asking him about the Starfish Prime explosion, which was a test of essentially anti-satellite and the electromagnetic pulse weaponry by the United States right back through the 1950s into the early 1960s. And it's awesome to think about it now. I mean, the implications of this are just mind-blowing. But back in the late 50s, early 60s, America did test weaponry which was involving the explosion of weapons either in high atmosphere or in orbit. And the biggest one of all, I think, was called Starfish Prime, and it was exploded over atolls in the northeastern Pacific. And incredibly, it was seen as far away as Hawaii, the flash, and it knocked out communications and electricity in Hawaii, of all places. And indeed, the impact was felt in as far away as New Zealand, where I grew up. And it's interesting because when I asked Major General Roger Teague, who'd worked in Space Command, he didn't know about the Starfish Prime tests. And I do. I think it's an important piece of American history. If we are expecting our foreign adversary rivals to not deploy anti-satellite weaponry, it does have to be acknowledged that America, along with every other nation involved in space, China and Russia, has at different times tested anti-satellite weaponry. And most recently, I think the US used an F-15 to knock out an old satellite in space just to demonstrate that capability. So moving on, Skinwalker Ranch has a lot of evidence for those complaining the security is insane with military. Ross, question. I'm a skywatcher. I thought seeing a UAP in 2016 was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. For 6 years, I looked at the skies and nothing. Since 2022 on clear nights, I've seen UAP, weird things that disappear and show the 5 observables. Some could have been misidentifications, of course, but in 2022, I saw 4. 2023, I lost count. It's not like I see a UAP every night. There's no clouds and I skywatch, but it's not unusual. I don't do CE5, I just look up. Is there an uptick on the phenomenon? Look, certainly there's an uptick on the phenomenon for me because so many people are sending me reports like yours, sir. I am getting on a daily basis videos from people purportedly of anomalous objects moving either in the atmosphere or in orbit. There is certainly, in terms of reported sightings, an uptick. It's impossible to know whether that's a genuine increase in the number of objects that are anomalous moving in our skies, because frankly, I think what's happening is people are starting to take a closer interest as we're all starting to talk about this. Ever since I started talking last month about Langley Air Force Base, and indeed Eglin Air Force Base, where there's been sightings of anomalous phenomena, I am being flooded with information suggesting that there is frequent anomalous activity around those and other Air Force facilities. Actually, I just want to mention something. I got a tip overnight. One of the stories that's been surfacing is the story about Eglin Air Force Base, and I notice AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, recently announced in its historical review report that a sighting that allegedly took place in January 2023 by a jet fighter pilot out of Eglin Air Force Base over the Gulf of Mexico, where he allegedly saw an Apollo command module acorn-shaped object. The AARO, the Pentagon's UFO Investigation Office, categorically denied that there was video of that incident. And very, very interestingly, there's an FOI I've just tweeted about where a guy has obtained paperwork from the US Air Force confirming there is video. Somebody's lying. And I know they're lying because overnight I've just received information telling me that the Air Force is reluctant to admit that there is video because the video came from their latest F-22 Raptor fighter. And there were 2 fighters, I'm told, on location that were there when this object was seen. And there is video. It's being declined for national security reasons. Yet AARO tries to make us believe this is a balloon. Utter BS. I'm calling it out. It's a flat-out lie. Next question. Hello, Mr. Ross. Thanks for your amazing work and coverage on this topic. I feel like we collectively are shooting ourselves in the foot again, not you particularly, Mr. Ross, by saying things like no government would come out with disclosure in today's climate, which is true. Yes, it is. But I don't think there is any climate where a government wholeheartedly tells everyone everything. There's way too many players involved in this for that to happen, in my opinion. Whistleblower-based disclosure seems to be the only way forward. Thoughts? Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're in agreement. As you've said, it's true that no government will ever come out with disclosure in today's climate. I think that's absolutely true. And I think part of the problem, part of the dilemma that I'm increasingly becoming aware of is I do think the US government is probably experimenting with non-human technology. I really do. I think the evidence is becoming overwhelming, and you're going to be hearing a lot more from from me in the next few months. What are we doing about our own space debris? China is 4 times the population of the US, and yet they have the same amount of space debris. These generals are talking out both sides, I presume both sides of their mouth. What about our space war capabilities? Any updates? Well, We're delighted to tell you that our friend Brian Enton from NewsNation has just visited Space Force, and you've just seen his report on what's happening out of the Peterson-Shriver Air Force Base in Colorado. So yes, we are chasing both what the US is doing to combat potential adversaries in space, and we are monitoring very, very closely, as we have done in a previous reality check, the threat from foreign adversaries to our own technology in space. It's a huge issue, and if and when, God forbid, a next war is fought, it will be fought in space, and we have to be ready for that. And frankly, that's why Space Force matters. Okay, I just have to say it. This is a viewer. Oh, I think my friends at NewsNation have put this in for fun. Ross covers very serious and urgent matters, but I have to fight my fangirl crush with tooth and nail in order to focus on the reporting instead of getting lost in these eyes. Oh, there, I feel better now. Well, I'm glad I'm making somebody happy. Thank you very, very much for those flattering comments. As a 60-plus-year-old man, it's nice to have comments like that, and thank you for giving me a good laugh. That's all from Reality Check this week. Lovely to be able to engage with you again. Looking forward to telling you more about mysterious and interesting stuff in the very near future. Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And please don't forget to click that red subscribe button to ensure you get more of NewsNation's unbiased and fact-driven news coverage.